Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Friday, January 31st, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Trump insists Egypt and Jordan will take Palestinians from Gaza. So President Trump on Thursday insisted that Jordan and Egypt will take in Palestinian refugees from Gaza despite fierce objection from the two Arab nations. So Trump's recent suggestion to clean out Gaza of its Palestinian population and send them to Jordan and Egypt raised fears that the U.S. may support the ethnic cleansing of the territory. His idea was met with quick rejection from Egypt and Jordan and the wider Arab world in general. The Arab League put out a statement. All sorts of Arab officials came out against it, not to mention the Palestinians themselves. But Trump is doubling down. When he was asked about this on Thursday, he was asked specifically about the response from Egypt and Jordan. And he said, quote, "They will do it. They will do it. They're going to do it. Okay. We do a lot for them and they're going to do it," end quote. So he's insisting that this is going to happen, even though, again, there's so much opposition to this, not to mention the fact that Hamas, is clearly not defeated. There would be resistance to this, a lot of resistance to this. This would mean, to force the Palestinians out of Gaza would mean Israel restarting the bombing campaign, tightening the siege again, and everything like that. But so Trump's calls to remove Palestinians from Gaza were welcomed by the more hardline elements of the Israeli government, who are openly in favor of ethnic cleansing and the establishment of Jewish settlements. And that includes Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. He's very happy about it. We'll get more into him in another story. So Steve Witkoff, Trump's Middle East envoy, did an interview on Thursday with Axios and talked about the destruction that he saw in Gaza when he visited the Netzarim corridor, which is an Israeli-controlled strip of land. And he also was in a helicopter flying over Gaza, looking down at the destruction. And he said that there's almost nothing left of Gaza. He said, quote, "People are moving north to get back to their homes and see what happened and turn around and leave. There is no water and no electricity. It is stunning just how much damage occurred there," end quote. So Witkoff, who's a real estate investor from New York, said that he thinks the reconstruction of Gaza will take 10 to 15 years. He said, quote, "There has been this perception we can get to a solid plan for Gaza in 5 years, but it's impossible. This is a 10 to 15 year rebuilding plan," end quote. So Witkoff added that the demolition and removal of the rubble alone would take 5 years. He said, quote, "There is nothing left standing, many unexploded ordnances. It is not safe to walk there. It is very dangerous. I wouldn't have known this without going there and inspecting," end quote. So it is hard to imagine Israel letting this big reconstruction project happen that's going to take this long, for the Palestinians. There's just a lot of doubt that I have here with everything that's happening, that we see Witkoff saying he's pushing for the full implementation of the ceasefire. But again, it's just hard to believe that this Israeli government is going to let everything play out and then let the reconstruction happen and everything, and the infrastructure be rebuilt. And the next one here, is also concerning. Smotrich praises Trump administration after meeting with Witkoff. So Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich praised the Trump administration on Thursday after he held a meeting with Steve Witkoff, the U.S. envoy for the Middle East. So Witkoff has been pushing for a full implementation of the Gaza ceasefire deal, and this idea is strongly opposed by Smotrich, who not only wants the genocidal war to be restarted, but wants an escalation with the goal of the gradual takeover of the entire Gaza Strip. Those are his words. He wants to conquer the whole territory. But despite these two seemingly having opposing ideas, Smotrich appeared to be very happy with how this meeting went. So Smotrich wrote on X after the meeting, quote, "We discussed the issues at hand, the courageous relationship and close cooperation between Israel and the United States, a relationship that is now strengthening dramatically with President Trump. We discussed the great importance of the return of the hostages and the complete victory for the sake of strengthening the security of the state of Israel," end quote. Smotrich said that they also discussed the, quote, "new outside-the-box thinking that the United States is promoting to enable the elimination of the forces of evil and the promotion of peace through strength in the Middle East and in general," end quote. So, he didn't say it directly, but I'm pretty sure this new outside-the-box thinking that Smotrich is talking about is what Trump's been saying about cleaning out Gaza, about getting the Palestinians out of there. Because when Trump first made these comments, Smotrich welcomed them, and he claimed this is the only solution that will bring peace and security to the residents of Israel. And it's kind of just similar rhetoric that he's saying after meeting with Witkoff. And Witkoff, so far, there's been reports he's discussed the idea of temporarily relocating Palestinians during reconstruction. I haven't seen him say anything publicly about what Trump said. In the Axios interview, he was asked about what Trump said, and he said he hasn't discussed it with Trump. That's what Witkoff is claiming. But again, what Smotrich is saying here, it sounds like that's something they discussed. And concluding his post about his meeting with Witkoff, Smotrich said, quote, "President Trump's USA is leading a moral and just line, and we look forward to continued cooperation to advance our common goals, and we will work on them together," end quote. So it's not good if they really do have common goals with Smotrich, because, again, he wants total ethnic cleansing of Gaza, take over Jewish settlements, and he wants the same thing in the West Bank, of course, too. All right, so the next one here, Hamas releases 3 Israeli hostages and 5 Thai nationals. So on Thursday, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad released 3 more Israeli hostages and 5 Thai nationals who were captured during the October 7th attack in exchange for the freeing of 110 Palestinians from Israeli jails. The first Israeli hostage to be released, Agam Berger, a 20-year-old female soldier, was handed over to the Red Cross by Hamas in northern Gaza's Jabalia refugee camp, which has been completely destroyed by the Israeli military. So the fact that they did it there makes it seem like they could have been there, even though Israel completely wiped the place out. They couldn't find her. So that happened earlier in the day, and then later Hamas and Islamic Jihad militants released a female Israeli civilian, Arbel Yehud, 29-year-old, and Gadi Mos, who's an 80-year-old man, and then the 5 Thai nationals. And this happened in Khan Yunis, and the handover to the Red Cross was done in front of the destroyed home of Hamas's slain leader, Yahya Sinwar. So footage and photos of particularly the female civilian being handed over kind of went all over the place, and there was a big crowd around them, and you see basically it was the Palestinian militants were like pushing through the crowd, to get her through. And because of that, Netanyahu delayed the release of the Palestinians. It looked like he was going to try to use this instance to just kind of the scene on the ground there to halt the release of the Palestinians. But they ended up going through with it once the Israelis reunited with their families. And then the guys from Thailand met with Thai officials, and I'm sure they're on their way home by now. They were working on farms in southern Israel when they were captured by Palestinian militants on October 7th. There was a few other migrant workers who were captured. Some were killed. So according to CNN, the Hamas prisoner media office said that the 110 Palestinians that were released on Thursday included 30 children, 32 who were sentenced to life, and 48 who were given high sentences. Some of the prisoners were deported upon their release, and their families have been prevented from traveling to meet them. I know one specifically was sent to Jordan, and then his wife or somebody tried to go into Jordan, but the Israelis stopped them because, of course, Israel controls the border crossing into Jordan from the West Bank. And And Israel has been trying to prevent Palestinians from celebrating the prisoner releases, and they opened fire on a crowd of Palestinians near a prison in the West Bank before the release, injuring at least 12, and they also dropped threatening leaflets on Gaza, warning against celebrations. And then it looks like Friday there's going to be another hostage exchange, and one of the Israeli Americans is going to be released. That's something Witkoff said. So even though everything's so shaky, and we've seen ceasefire violations, things are still moving along. The hostage releases are happening. The Palestinians are getting let out of jail. The deal's still in effect. All right, the next one here. Gaza Health Ministry says 42 more bodies recovered from the Gaza rubble. So Gaza's health ministry said Thursday that over the previous 24-hour period, hospitals in Gaza received 43 more bodies of Palestinians killed by Israeli aggression, including 42 that were recovered from the rubble and one who died of previously sustained wounds. The other Palestinian died due to previously sustained wounds. I got to get rid of that. I mentioned that twice in the story. Sorry. The bodies have brought the health ministry's death toll since October 2023 to 47,460, and we know this is a significant undercount. The Lancet study says the real death toll, just violent deaths, is likely over 70,000. You factor in indirect deaths, we get into hundreds of thousands of Palestinians killed. And Palestinians have continued to be killed by Israeli forces despite the ceasefire, although at a significantly lower rate than before. Since January 19th, when the ceasefire went into effect, more than 80 have been killed by Israeli forces. So also on Thursday, Hamas confirmed that its military leader, Mohammed Daif, was dead. The Israeli military claimed that it killed Daif, who led the Al-Qassem's brigades about 6 months ago, but it was not confirmed by Hamas until now. Al-Qassam brigade spokesman Abu Obaida said, quote, "We mourn the martyrdom of our leader, Mohammed Daif, to our great people," end quote. He also said that other senior commanders were killed. He confirmed some of them who were named. And while Hamas's leadership has taken a blow, they killed Daif, they killed Sinwar, they killed Haniyeh, the organization continues. And, according to U.S. intelligence, they've recruited as many fighters as they have lost. And what we've seen since the ceasefire is that they're basically back in control, even though, everything is just completely destroyed. But Hamas fighters are still there. And it just goes to show what a failure this was for Israel. So, even if they do want to go ahead with the ethnic cleansing, it's not like they could, it's not going to be easy for Israel to pull that off. All right, so the next one here, Lebanon fears IDF troops will stay past deadline. So the Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon continues, as does Israel's flaunting of the ceasefire. At least 11 violations of the ceasefire have been reported in the past 24 hours, including airstrikes, drone strikes, and gunfire against Lebanese civilians. This article is from Jason Ditz, by the way. I don't think I said that. Drone strikes were reported on a house in the village of Yamar al-Shukaif. The house had already been effectively destroyed by Israeli forces, and there is no report of any casualties in today's strike. It's not clear why Israel attacked the house that was already destroyed. A more unusual aggression occurred in Tal Nahaz Thursday morning when Israeli forces raided and set fire to a poultry farm. This incident was reported by multiple sources, and Israel has not commented nor offered a plausible explanation for why the farm was burned. While no casualties have been reported in either the farm fire or the Yamar al-Shukaif drone strike, the same can't be said of Israeli gunfire against civilians. At least 36 civilians were reported wounded on Tuesday alone, with more casualties reported before and after then. So, in additional incidents, the Israeli Air Force attacked an engineering truck it claimed was owned by Hezbollah, and 3 Turkish nationals were killed along the border, allegedly trying to cross into Israel. Israel also reported shooting down a Hezbollah surveillance drone thought to be trying to enter Israeli airspace. Although Israel has committed well over 1,000 ceasefire violations, it presented the plans of this unarmed drone as a major ceasefire violation by Hezbollah. So, and there's concern in Lebanon that, they extended the withdrawal deadline to February 18th, but there's concern in Lebanon that Israel is not going to be gone by then. All right, so the next one here, Israeli troops forcibly displaced 20,000 Palestinians from Jenin. So this article is from The Cradle. Authorities in the occupied West Bank city of Jenin announced that tens of thousands of Palestinians have been displaced from the city's refugee camp as a result of the ongoing Israeli operation there. The Jenin government said in a statement on January 30th that most of the Jenin camp residents, estimated at 20,000 citizens, were displaced as a result of the Israeli aggression. It added that around 400,000 Palestinian citizens have been affected by the siege and aggression on Jenin. The Israeli operation in Jenin, dubbed Iron Wall, has entered its 10th day. At least 16 Palestinians have been killed. The operation also includes violent Israeli army raids in other areas of the West Bank, such as Nablus and Tulkarm. Israeli troops have been systematically destroying homes and expelling residents from the Jenin and Tulkarm camps. 60 homes have been demolished by Israeli forces in Jenin camp. And I just don't understand what the possible justification for this is. You know, you have these resistance groups in Jenin, but they're just going in and destroying all the buildings, tearing up the roads, and they're saying that they're going to stay in the refugee camp, going to continue to occupy it. This is something, of course, Smotrich is all about, ramping things up in the West Bank. And there are signs that part of the deal to get Israel to sign the ceasefire deal in Gaza was for the U.S. to back these increased operations in the West Bank. All right, so the next one here, Palestinians fear and Israeli celebrations as UNRWA ban begins. This article is from Middle East Eye. So Israel's banning of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, came into effect on Thursday, with Palestinians gravely worried about the impact it will have on the provision of basic humanitarian needs and services. There are two Knesset laws targeting UNRWA. One prohibits the agency's work within areas under Israeli sovereignty, while the other bans any contact with the agency. The Israeli law says the ban on the UN agency would include occupied East Jerusalem, though it is recognized internationally as Palestinian land. Israel annexed the area in 1967 in a move widely condemned by the international community. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, on Tuesday notified the UN Security Council that Israel would terminate its cooperation with the agency. According to UNRWA's communications director, the agency has yet to receive any official communication on how the Israeli parliament's ban will be implemented. So essentially, as things stand now, is UNRWA is just continuing to do what they do, continuing to work, and they're not really exactly clear how Israel's going to enforce this thing. They're saying they don't have a plan to close their operations. But amid all these concerns, there was a celebration organized by far-right Israelis around the UNRWA headquarters and in East Jerusalem. So some Israelis are celebrating UNRWA being shut down. And again, UNRWA is responsible for most of the aid deliveries going into Gaza. So if they do get shut down, there's nothing in place for that to be replaced. And that does threaten the ceasefire, because a big part of the deal was allowing more aid into Gaza. All right, so the next one here, U.S.-led coalition launches drone strike in Syria. So this may be the first U.S. airstrike under the new Trump administration that we have here. So the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported on Thursday that the U.S.-led coalition in Syria launched a drone strike in the Idlib province targeting a car. And I saw this, kind of all over Twitter as well. Not all the details are confirmed here. There's some conflicting reports, but it looks like this strike definitely happened, and it is likely the U.S. coalition. And if it's the U.S. coalition, that means it is most likely the U.S. that launched this strike. So the observatory said that the strike killed the person driving the car, who is believed to be a leader of Haras al-Din, which is the Al-Qaeda affiliate that just announced this week that it was dissolving, saying that its goals were completed by the regime change that ousted former President Bashar al-Assad. So there are other reports that said the victim of the strike was a member of the Turkestan Islamic Party. That is the Uyghur Muslim group that seeks to establish an Islamic state in China's Xinjiang region. And there is a branch in Syria. They were involved in the offensive led by HTS that ousted Assad, and some of its senior members have been absorbed into the new Syrian military. So not exactly clear who was targeted here, but a lot of these groups, they're fluid. Like these guys, like TIP guys will be part of HTS. Haras al-Din guys, will go. You probably went back to HTS and everything. So the damage to the vehicle suggests that it was hit by a U.S.-made AGM 114 R9X Hellfire missile. And this is nicknamed the Flying Ginsu or the Ninja missile. And essentially what it is, it's a giant blade. It shreds its target with blades, with razor-sharp blades, instead of using an explosive warhead. So a lot of times you see these cars ripped up like this, but it doesn't look like there was an actual explosion. It's a really crazy weapon. And this is the U.S. has been using these a lot in northwest Syria over the years. Starting in 2020 was when I noticed it. So, again, if this is confirmed, if this strike was launched by the U.S., this is the first known U.S. airstrike under the Trump administration. And, considering what's happened in Syria, HTS took over the country. The Al-Qaeda guys took over. You take out one guy in Idlib. Like, what is even the point of that? And according to the Syrian Observatory, this was the second U.S. coalition strike in Idlib this month. The last one happened on January 15th, which was when Biden was still in. And I had missed this. Apparently this strike, it was a drone strike that fired 3 missiles at a motorcycle, which killed the rider and a boy who was walking nearby. So a child was killed by this U.S. strike that just got no attention. And even I missed it. And it's not clear who they targeted. The Syrian Network for Human Rights said the motorcycle rider was a member of Haras al-Din, while the Syrian Observatory described him as a former member of ISIS. And it's possible he could be both of those things. Haras al-Din and ISIS are not too different ideologically. So we'll try to follow up with that, see if we can get more details. All right, so the next one here. People in our government supported Al-Qaeda, Tulsi Gabbard Senate hearing. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone, and there is a lot of aspects to the Tulsi Gabbard Senate hearing for Director of National Intelligence. But I thought the most interesting thing was her, and Kyle wrote it up, was her saying how the U.S. supported Al-Qaeda in Syria, how Obama, the Timber Sycamore program under the CIA that armed these, so-called moderate rebels, which turn out that they had ties to Al-Qaeda. And this is something that the U.S. was aware of. There's a leaked, I think it was obtained by a FOIA, a DNI, or actually no, it was the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency that basically said, a large element of these opposition groups is Al-Qaeda and other Salafist jihadist groups. So she got into this in the Senate hearing because the big thing that they go after her for is her views on Syria. She did go over and meet with Assad at some point. She's questioned some of the chemical weapons attacks. This is what they really go after her for. And Senator Mark Kelly attacked her. And she said she was offended by. That was a different back and forth I saw. Essentially, the accusation, they always try to call her some kind of traitor, that she's pro-Russia and everything. So the claim from Senator Kelly was that Gabbard is repeating Russian and Iranian talking points by discussing the U.S. support for Al-Qaeda in Syria. And she said, quote, "As someone who enlisted in the military specifically because of Al-Qaeda's terrorist attack on 9/11 and committing myself and my life to doing what I could do to defeat these terrorists, it was shocking and a betrayal to me and every person who was killed on 9/11, their families and my brothers and sisters in uniform. When, as a member of Congress, I learned about President Obama's dual programs that he had begun, really to overthrow the regime of Syria, and being willing to, through the CIA's Timber Sycamore program that has now been made public, of working with and arming and equipping Al-Qaeda in an effort to overthrow that regime, starting yet another regime change war in the Middle East," end quote. So, and she also read the email that Jake Sullivan sent to Hillary Clinton back in 2012, that AQ is on our side in Syria. So this kind of stuff that I think a lot of Americans probably don't really understand about Syria, being brought up in a big public, big controversial hearing like this. I'm sure some people might have heard this for the first time. All right, so the next one here, Russia warns the U.S. over Trump missile defense order. So Russia may expand its arsenal of nuclear weapons if the U.S. goes ahead with a major missile defense program that's been ordered by President Trump. And this was reported by Russia's TASS news agency. So Trump signed this executive order on Monday to develop an Iron Dome for America that can intercept ballistic, hypersonic, and other types of advanced missiles, which is a totally different thing than Israel's Iron Dome, which is designed to shoot down these short-range crude rockets that Hamas fires. So this order, another aspect of it, it doesn't just call for a missile defense system for the United States. It also calls for an improvement in missile defense to protect U.S. troops deployed in other countries and the territory of U.S. allies, so to protect other countries as well. So writing in the Russian journal International Affairs, Grigory Mashkov, the Russian Foreign Ministry's special ambassador, said that the U.S.'s global missile defense posture was already a threat to Russia and said expanding it further, quote, puts an end to the prospects of strategic offensive arms reduction and preservation of strategic stability on the previous terms, end quote. And, you know, I've seen some people say that, oh, this is missile defense. How can Russia take this as a threat? How is this going to fuel a new arms race if they're talking about defense? The whole thing is that, you know, you see what Trump is saying, that he wants it to preserve the U.S.'s second strike capability, which means if the U.S. comes under nuclear attack, it would be able to fire a nuclear attack in response. But that means when you have these states with all these nuclear weapons that are pointed at each other, if one of them starts to build up this new really big missile shield, in order to make sure that they can get past that missiles, the other state will build up their missiles, and then they'll probably all, you know, their offensive missiles, and then they'll also work on their shield, and then the U.S. in response will build more missiles. You know, we'll be right back in the Cold War, like the days of real proliferation. This is what I predicted would probably happen, and this is what Russia is warning. And Mashkov said that it is not, quote, ruled out that in the current conditions of confrontation with the West, with its policy of inflicting strategic damage on Russia, we may face the need for moving away from restrictions on nuclear and missile arsenals in favor of their quantitative and qualitative increase, end quote. He said that one possible retaliatory measure Russia could take is adjusting its position on the Non-Proliferation Treaty and other commitments Moscow has made related to the transparency of its nuclear stockpile. And so Trump's executive order clashes with his recent comments about seeking denuclearization with Russia and China, since it's clear the development of a major new missile defense system would spark a new arms race. And Mashkov warned that an arms race was already underway. He said, quote, a missile arms race is already in full swing. So is the large-scale modernization of nuclear arsenals and WMD delivery vehicles. The militarization of space is gaining momentum, which in the near future is likely to become another scene of military confrontation, end quote. That's another reason why I think arms control is so important, to prevent what is, you know, the seems inevitable militarization of space. Trump's order talked about putting interceptors in space. You know, it goes back to Reagan's Star Wars program that failed. So this whole thing is just a bad idea, and I hope Trump follows that denuclearization talk up with something real. All right, so the next one here, Trump orders Guantanamo Bay to prepare for 30,000 migrants. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. President Donald Trump is preparing a migrant processing facility in U.S.-occupied Cuba to house as many as 30,000 migrants illegally living in the U.S. On the campaign trail, Trump made immigration a central issue, pledging to expel people from the U.S. with an emphasis on convicted criminals. On Wednesday, the president signed an executive order to make it possible to send some of those people to a migrant detention facility at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. The order says, quote, I hereby direct the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security to take all appropriate actions to expand the Migrant Operations Center at Naval Station Guantanamo Bay to full capacity, end quote. So the migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay is separate from the CIA torture prison, what Gitmo is most notorious for. But Kyle makes a good point here. So Kristi Noem made a statement that eerily sounded like, you know, war on terror talk from the early 2000s, that what people, you know, how they talked about the prisoners at Gitmo. Noem said, quote, there might be some resources that could be established for the worst of the worst at Guantanamo Bay. and that's something that he is evaluating along with our team at the Department of Homeland Security, end quote. So she said the worst of the worst. And Kyle points out that during the Bush administration, Americans were regularly told, don't worry about the torture programs, don't worry about the conditions at Gitmo. These people are the worst of the worst. So a little eerie that she's using that same language to talk about these migrants that could potentially be sent here. And I saw someone make a joke on Twitter about, being worried about getting sent to Gitmo for criticizing Israel because of the other anti-Semitism executive order. So I think, using Guantanamo Bay for something like this is not a good sign. All right, so the next one here, no survivors after Black Hawk hits passenger jet, 67 dead. So I mentioned this yesterday. I really didn't know many details. I think yesterday I said that it looked like some survivors were recovered, but no, there were no survivors. There were 64 people on board the passenger jet that was hit by this Black Hawk, U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter. The jet was going to land at the Reagan National Airport, which is right on the Potomac River on the Virginia side. And as it was coming down to land, the Black Hawk just crashed right into it. And the Black Hawk was training. It didn't have any purpose to be there, to be where it was. It's completely outrageous that this happened. The military saying that it was preventable. It was not the fault of the airline pilot one bit. And all these people are dead, and a lot of young people are dead. There was a figure skating team coming back, a lot of teenagers among them, and I believe there's also 2 Russian nationals. So it's just a tragedy, and they're still pulling bodies out of the Potomac River. And it was an American Airlines flight from Wichita, Kansas. And again, like the video, it's really crazy. You see the plane's just like about to land, and then boom, this helicopter just runs right into it. So at least 28 bodies, including all 3 of the soldiers who were on the helicopter, had been pulled from the icy waters of the Potomac River as recovery operations continue. And this is the worst aviation disaster in the U.S. since 2001. So we'll see if more comes out about what exactly happened with the Black Hawk helicopter. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints, one from Scott Horton. Senators peddle debunked lies to attack Gabbard for supporting a Snowden pardon. So this was another thing that they talked about at the Senate hearing. It was Gabbard's stance on Edward Snowden, and they're trying to get her to call him a traitor. So this is actually an excerpt from Scott's book about Edward Snowden with a little blurb at the beginning from Kyle about the hearing. One from Eli Clifton, F-35 crashes the same day Lockheed CEO touts its success. I don't think I talked about that on the show. There was a F-35 crash in Alaska, and the video is really crazy. You just see it fall from the sky and explode. The pilot ejected, but these things just crash all the time. One from Ramsey Baroud, this is what Palestinian unity looks like. One from Lawrence Whitner, a pathway to avoid nuclear catastrophe. And our spotlight is from Ted Snyder. This is him writing at the American Conservative. Biden must explain what the Ukraine war was for. So please go check all that stuff out. That is everything for me for today. That's it for the week. I hope everyone has a good weekend. Let's hope this Gaza ceasefire holds better, that nobody gets killed and that it continues. You could always support this show by sharing it. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Like, subscribe, comment, leave reviews if you listen to the podcast. Follow us on social media. Instagram, we got over 2,000 followers on TikTok now, thanks to Addie, who does the clips. She does the Instagram posts too. It's all looking really good. If you don't follow us over there, definitely go do that. Also follow us on Twitter and my account over there. That's it for me. I will see you in a few days. Thanks for listening.